As they say, everybody wins the bye week, but you know what? Be blessed. Feel good. You're Ohio State fans. You win almost every other game too. So it works out pretty well either way. Welcome to Buckeyes Live right here at the Voice of College Football on a Wednesday. Hopefully you got that notification. 10 a.m. Eastern time. Here we are. Most of you watch us after the fact. So keep that in mind. We do have most of our viewers who watch us after the fact, which is great if you can't catch us, but typically it's Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. That way you can join the chat and send those comments and questions directly to myself, Steve, and Tony Gerdeman right next to me, BuckeyeHuddle.com. It's the Buckeye Weekly podcast as well. Get there for your Buckeye updates and analysis. And Tony's got so many interesting little takes and little labels on some of these things that I find fascinating in terms of his bringing history to the present and tying it all together. Got a knack for that, Tony. I got to tell you that.
Thank you, sir.
Steve, of course, Bucknuts 247 Sports on vacation this week.
Yes, the bye week, open week, we took full advantage of it. Coming down here to Edisto Beach, South Carolina. Never been here before. It is a very quiet place. There's not much going on down here, but it is a great place to visit, certainly. So got away for a few days. I'll be back. My nephew is playing his last high school game on Friday, so I'll be going to that. And then got a wedding on Saturday, an OSU basketball exhibition on Sunday. Speaking of which, Ohio State basketball, Anthony Thompson from Lebanon, Ohio, the highest rated player, number 7 overall nationally that Ohio State has signed in 16 years, going back to Jared Sullinger in 2010. So, yeah, it's high times for that, but obviously we're here to talk football, but getting my plugs in on that. They play Ohio University exhibition Sunday at 2 at the Shot. It's on BTN Plus.
Well, that Sullinger signing worked out all right.
Yeah, got to a Final Four, no doubt. So we'll see if this guy can help Ohio State get the program rolling in the right direction.
Well, before we move on to this week's activities and rhetoric, that 34-0 pretty much worked out the way everyone anticipated, Steve. So how was your trip to Madison and the football game?
Everything was great. No problem getting up there. No problem getting around town. And I changed my flight from Columbus to come down here to Charleston, South Carolina on Sunday. And that all worked like a charm. So the trip, no problems at all. And obviously Ohio State had no issues at all with Wisconsin. And not that many of us thought there would be. I mean, I think I had 41-13, and that's a 28-point win. And this was 34-0. Just dominant. I think Wisconsin, obviously, with playing with their third quarterback, Hunter Simmons, they're just not going to be able to win any games that way. And their defense didn't seem to be too bad, but their offense didn't produce much of anything against Ohio State's great defense. So that was kind of the story of the day. Carnell Tate made a couple of amazing catches, obviously. Julian Sayin continued on his rampage, 36 of 42. That's just unheard of. The completion percentage back to 80% on the year for him, leads the nation. And just overall, again, a dominating performance. They haven't let up off the gas pedal since the week 1 win over Texas. They've rampaged through everybody, and they're getting a good week off here. I think the run game is obviously something we're going to get into, but that's something that they need to continue to work on, obviously. But otherwise, all other facets, except maybe some special teams, really worked pretty well there at Wisconsin.
Tony.
Well, Ryan Day talks about making the special teams a strength, but I don't know that it's going to be a strength this year for the Buckeyes. It's just there as an obligation. But overall, you continue to be amazed by Julian Sayin and his accuracy and his how calm he is. And then also he was out of the pocket quite a bit on Saturday and still accurate as heck. And they opened up the RPO game, and that was effective. And so they only rushed for like 100 yards or something. But if you tack on the number of passes out of the RPOs, then that number goes up. Unfortunately, the average yards per rush does not, because it's still like they ran the ball however many times it was, average 3 yards a catch or 3 yards a carry, and that's not good enough. They need to increase that and improve that. And I know everybody wants to bench Tegra Shabola. It wasn't only Tegra who struggled on Saturday on the offensive line. Everybody except for maybe Austin Sierveld had snaps where they let somebody run right by them that created a loss, a negative play. So there's plenty of good film out there to go back and evaluate over this bye week and see what can be fixed and what can't. And at some point, you're going to have to decide what you want to do about right guard other than rotating, because there have now been, they rotated Ethan Anianwa in there with Tegra Shabola and then stopped, and they've rotated Joshua Padilla in there with Tegra Shabola. And at some point, you're going to have to decide, are you just going to keep doing this, or are you going to make a change? And I know people are clamoring for a change, but it's a tough thing to do, I guess, without having to do it without an injury. But overall, they need to improve that, and they're still trying to figure out the best way to attack with the running backs. And we saw Isaiah West get some run. We'll see if he gets more. If it's Bo Jackson and Isaiah West moving forward, 2 true freshmen, and then you got C.J. Donaldson that does his short yardage stuff. That's, I don't want to say it's daunting or it's scary, because talented running backs, doesn't matter what year they are, they need to get something. And I think those 2 guys give them the most, but it's been a while since Bo Jackson has given them something to write home about. It's been a few weeks since he was the guy rushing for 100 yards on 9 carries, and they need to figure out how to get him back to that as well.
Yeah, so there was a thought process during this game at some point that hit me and others that when you take on this Wisconsin team that is so depleted in the secondary, do you take advantage of that and open up the passing game and work on the passing game and make sure you win the game and win it comfortably? Or do you say they've got a pretty good front 7 and they're going to be loaded up against the run, and we're going to work on our running game, even though this is going to be a more difficult path to a victory, which they didn't do.
Yeah, it seemed to me like they decided to come out throwing the football and not try to put the square peg in the round hole. And then, ultimately started to run the ball a little bit more, but never had any kind of good success with it. 28 carries for 98 yards and 3.5 average. I mean, they're lowering their yards per game every time out. They're not getting better. They're getting worse at it. So, but, the good news is you've got a quarterback who approached 400 yards. He set career highs in every category, completions, attempts, yards, and touchdowns, tied his touchdown mark. So, yeah, they've got to continue to work on this run game and get things figured out, because you're getting into the second half of the season now in the Big Ten, the stretch run. November, it's going to be much more difficult to throw the football in these conditions as they move forward, when it starts, being a little bit more windy, and also, the potential for rain or snow or whatever. So, yeah, in cold weather, just no doubt. So, to me, they've got to continue to work on it.
Well, and Day even said it this week that in designing the offense, the game plan each week, you look at the defense that you're going against and the weaknesses there. And like Mark said, there are some weaknesses in Wisconsin's pass defense, so they went and attacked it. But they also said they wanted to see what this passing game looked like when it was unleashed, and I think they liked what they saw. And there are a couple of plays that could have gone even longer, but it didn't stop them necessarily from scoring. Like there was a play on the first drive where Julian dumped off a pass to maybe Bo Jackson, and then if he would have looked up, he would have seen Jeremiah Smith running free. But like a few plays later, he hits Carnell Tate on the 38-yard touchdown or whatever it was, and so they got it anyways. But there are still plays to be had with this passing game, but I don't think you can find much fault with it. You're looking hard. 36 of 42. You can count the incompletions, and you remember all of them. And so, like, it's when you can do that, that's rare. It's not much, not a lot of time in Ohio State history where you're like, let's count all of the incompletions from JT Barrett because there are too many to keep track of.
Yeah, it would be strange if this team evolved that way, where it had this, we protect the redshirt freshman quarterback from a play calling standpoint and lean on, at that point, CJ Donaldson, number one, to be a battering ram, and then to get explosive plays maybe from James Peoples and, maybe Bo Jackson. And 3, 4, or 5 weeks later, it's maybe we're a passing team. Maybe we are 2017 Ohio State or 2020 Ohio State. But so, Tony, the bar being that basically the bare minimum is this team should win a Big Ten championship and be a Final Four team. But of course, the goal is to win a national championship each and every year. And this team certainly, they are capable. I'm not going to say they seem to be. They are capable. That doesn't mean they're going to do it. How good does the running game, if Julian Sayin is it's probably going to turn out to be one of the top 5 to 10 passers in college football this year, how good does the running game need to be to complement that?
Especially with the defense. I don't know that it needs to be it does not need to be one of the top, say 20, 25 rush offenses in the nation. It just needs to be able to convert in the red zone when they need it to. So it's interesting where how much do we make of it? I mean, they're still winning comfortably. The schedule's getting easier, so that would continue. But I think the thing that concerns Ryan Day is just being able to pick up short yardage when you need to, be able to stay on schedule, efficiency, that sort of thing. On first down, can you pick up 4 or 5 yards because that's what they're looking for? On second down, can you pick up 3 yards because that's what they're looking for? So it's those the minutia of it rather than 180 yards a game, because how many points will they need to score to win a playoff game? Is it 24 to be and can you score 24 throwing the ball 35 times and running it 30? I think you could. I think you can, especially against the defenses that we're seeing nationwide, where you're watching Georgia Ole Miss trade scores for their first 3 quarters of a game without forcing a punt.
Steve, we've seen this merry-go-round with the offensive line before, and it worked out. They eventually got it right, but they're good enough in all the other aspects of the games on both sides of the ball to continue to hammer teams by 3 touchdowns and figure out the offensive line in the process. So maybe this is going to be one of those deals again.
Yeah, again, like Tony hit on earlier, they've been rotating Josh Padilla in there on some series for Tegra Shabola, and I feel like when they've put Josh in there, things have gone pretty well. So again, the coaches have all the data that they're looking at in terms of who's been efficient both in the games and in practices, and who's executing and who isn't, and they're going to play the best 5 guys. I don't have any doubt about that. So they've just got to get this ironed out. I mean, and I think some of it's play calling as well. Is there predictability to what Ohio State's doing at times? They had a 2nd and 3, and I said to the person next to me, they are almost assuredly running the ball here, and they did. And Bo Jackson, got stood up for like a 1-yard loss. I mean, everybody in the stadium knew it was coming. So I think you got to break some tendencies sometimes in order to set some things up to have more success. So to me, they've got a ways to go. And I think it's from the coaches down. I think the coaches got to self-evaluate and say, these are the plays we're calling, and they're not getting us anything. We've got to go about this a different way. It seems to me like they are so heavy trying to run the ball inside and very rarely get the ball on the perimeter where they can maybe do a little bit more damage. So maybe throw into the backs would loosen things up a little bit. I'm not sure. I don't know what all you can do, but they got to come up with some better ideas, I think, as well, in terms of putting the players in a better position to execute something that's going to work.
Well, I've thrown in the backs work this past week in the dump offs when you had Bo Jackson had maybe 5 catches, and 3 of those were
5
explosive.
for 57. Yeah.
3 of those were explosive because they went for more than 15 yards. 3 of them went for 16 yards. and he gets upfield quickly. I think when you're looking at the running game, there are instances where there's nowhere for the running backs to go. The plays are just blown up from the outset. So, that's scheme, that's execution, that's all of that. I do think it was a positive sign to see so little 13 personnel on random downs. I think you saw it mostly on short yardage downs instead of in the past we've seen it open up a drive and for odd reasons. So maybe they're going away from that, or maybe they just wanted to see what it looked like in a lot of mostly 11 and 12 personnel this week, and whether that opened up the running game. I think it certainly opened up the RPO game, as we saw, like all of those little 7 to 9 yard hitches and quick passes to Jeremiah Smith. Those are basically runs, even though if they don't necessarily show up in the box score like that. So they're still moving the ball, and you'd love to see what this offense looked like if they were rushing for 160 yards a game, because then the play action really gets involved. But they're trying to find other ways to do that. And we did see Julian Saint keep the ball on a read for the first time, I think, this year. And if he does that one or two times a game, I think that will help. But they don't need to do it right now against the teams they're facing. They're not going to be necessarily tested until the Michigan game, but they're also not going to take Penn State lightly at all, and probably shouldn't take UCLA lightly right now the way things are going.
Yeah, UCLA is tied with Oregon in the Big Ten standings right now, and Northwestern.
So, a lot of 3-1 or whatever it is, 3-1 teams right now.
Yeah, when you've got like 5 0-4 teams, they tend to prop up the rest of the league with those records. But I love looking at this is the sweet spot for looking at scenarios that aren't necessarily going to turn out to be scenarios, but they still involve the UCLAs and the Northwesterns of the world. So I find it fun because they're both sitting at 3-1.
Well, and
right
Kursignetti, yesterday or Monday, talking about UCLA is 3-0. They're a 3-0 team since they made their coaching change, and they're playing better on all sides of the ball. And it's like, yeah, he's right. So like now this is a big noon kickoff, between UCLA and Indiana. It's a big game. That's undefeated UCLA versus undefeated Indiana for a spot in the Big Ten championship game. Let's get after it.
I love it. I couldn't wait after I was done with everything and doing the call-in show on Saturday night. The first highlight package I went for, UCLA and Maryland. Just had to see how that one played out. UCLA had 7 points with 3.5 minutes left in the game. And I was thinking, how did they get to 20? How in the world did they get to 20? Well, long pass and an interception, and boom, they got it done.
Loxley, baby.
Yes.
Loxley, baby.
If you need somebody who's going to blow a 2-score lead in the fourth quarter, he's your guy.
They found a way to lose 3 Big Ten games that they could have easily won. Mm-hmm. So
all by 3 or 4 points.
Yeah. And all with double-digit leads in the fourth quarter.
Mm.
Oh my God. That's crazy.
What's
the opposite of coach of the year? What is the opposite? Fired. That's what it is. Fired.
Unemployed.
Franklin. Fired.
Yes. With the way that coaching list vacancy is shaping up, Maryland would be at the very bottom of that list in terms of attraction. It's going to be a dogfight for a good coach.
I think same for Wisconsin. And we saw they came out and said they're giving him 1 more year to try and straighten it out, which, that's great. We all are, hoping for the best for Luke Fickell. He's an Ohio State guy, but very difficult to put a winning team on the field without great players. And so they're going to have to go heavy into the portal this offseason and go out and buy some really good players, because they, they're deficient at about 10 or 12 spots right now.
It's also going to be interesting in the future, or in the present now, watching programs bring in new coaches who can bring players with them, because where would Indiana be without James Madison's players right now?
Yep.
They all came over with Kursignetti, and like it's can you bring in a quarterback that will stay healthy? Luke Fickell cannot. I don't think it's his fault. He's not the one injuring the quarterbacks. But can you bring in a quarterback? Can you make the right decision at quarterback? Kursignetti was able to do that. And can you bring in players with you from your very, very, very good program? He was able to do that. So I think that's one of the things that you've got to look at the short term and also the long term, because you can make some waves in the short term like Indiana has if you make the right hire, but that hire has to be able to bring some players with him. And I'll be interested to see like how much of that factors into schools' decisions, and out there, like who's out there right now that would be somebody that would bring players with them that you'd want.
Yeah, that's a major consideration, no doubt. Is you just can't have bodies sitting in the seats. You gotta have people actually making plays and making a difference for your team. And those guys are in short supply, it seems, a lot of times.
Yeah, the quarterback decisions during the transfer portal era have been even heightened versus the previous era, where your quarterback situation was dependent upon your evaluation of talent and then also your prestige or ability to go sign the best quarterbacks to do it. But then we could look at any program in the country 10 years ago and say, this is what it looks like for the next 2 to 4 years for their quarterback procession. But now it's just a free for all. And you can tie these coaches that are on the hot seat or have been recently fired directly to their quarterback decisions. It was going well for Mike Norvell with Jordan Travis, and then he attached hip to DJ Uiagalelei, and that didn't work out so well. And Hugh Freeze decided that Peyton Thorne could play winning football in the SEC, and that didn't happen. And
look, I understand what Hugh Freeze was doing, because at Michigan State, Nick Saban couldn't win in the Big Ten and at Michigan State, but then he came to the SEC and it was easy for him. You go get a Michigan State quarterback and Peyton Thorne can't win in the Big Ten, can't win at Michigan State. Surely he's going to be able to win in the SEC. Unfortunately, didn't happen for him either. But Jackson Arnold has come to save the day. Oh no, that's not working out either. And maybe it's because Hugh Freeze is no longer the only coach paying players now. And so things aren't not as easy as they used to be for him when he was denying all of the cheating and then getting busted for all of the cheating. So he needs to go away because he's just not any good.
There you are.
Well, yeah, I'm not going to be a defender of Hugh Freeze, considering what his past looks like, and if he's separated himself from that and no longer partakes in that, then that's great. That's amazing, and people can certainly learn and turn over a new leaf, and I'm all for that. We all need forgiveness, but that team, just looking at the team, regardless who the head coach is and the results of these games and the finishes of these Auburn games, they are the most unlucky team in college football. It's crazy. They should be 6-1 right now. But back to the Buckeyes. Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
The margins are just so thin, and in the SEC and really anywhere anymore now that parity has come and NIL and the transfer portal is making so many teams closer than ever before. And we talked about it like last week. Like, where is the tip of the top in the SEC? Like, it's kind of come down a little bit, but the basement has risen as well in the SEC. So you just got to be careful what you're doing out there, or else you're going to get got any given week. And the good news is anybody can go beat LSU now, so that's fun.
I think I'll take 10 minutes and do this and go through all the scores in the SEC, because I think at one point I was looking at middle 10 or 12 teams, and they were all playing, like, excluding a couple games, 1-score games, just all of them 1-score games.
I saw the report stat last week, the week before, that SEC scores have been like 1/10 of a point off of NFL scores in terms of score differential. It's been like 7.6 per game, and the NFL is like 7.5 or something like that. It's like just close games throughout because of any number of reasons.
Getting back to the Buckeyes, Tony, you had brought up the wide receiver situation, the room, the depth chart, the targets, and how that may play out going forward.
Well, I think one of the benefits of playing so much 11 personnel this past week is that you got to see more receivers. We saw Quincy Porter out there. He looked good. We saw Mylan Graham out there making a catch. It looked like Carnell Tate on the sidelines. So I think anytime you can get those guys involved and give Jeremiah Smith a little bit of a rest, give Carnell Tate a little bit of a rest, allow Brandon Innes to play outside some, I think the benefits will continue to help. And there'll be a game where Quincy Porter or Mylan Graham has a favorable matchup and they make a play. So I think getting those guys more involved or just out there more is helpful for the entire offense. Now, run blocking and all of those things, they're still going to have to grow. But I think the deeper you can go, the better. You can give Jeremiah Smith a rest. And he's dealing with double teams the entire time. So I think that is not a bad thing mentally as well, just to give him a break here and there. But I really liked what I saw from Quincy Porter in this past game. He does not look like a true freshman in any way.
Yeah, I agree. I think anything they can do to get Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter more involved would be great. Obviously, you look at the game this past week, they targeted Jeremiah Smith 13 times and he had 9 catches. So they're doing everything they can to get him the ball. And as Tony said, maybe even missed him once or twice as well. So that's great. Your best players need to be touching the ball the most. And he and Carnell Tate have kind of set themselves far and above anybody else at the wide receiver position. But then I do want to see more out of Quincy Porter and Mylan Graham just because they're capable just as well. And we just haven't seen it yet. So I think it's time to get those guys going and see what they can produce as well for this team.
And then we've seen Carnell Tate in the slot. Doing more of that allows you to bring in Mylan Graham or Quincy Porter outside. But we also finally saw Mylan Graham in the slot this past week, which is something that they've wanted to add to his game, but we haven't seen it yet. So now seeing that happen, that also grows his ability to be on the field any given down.
Jordan Lewis is asking and getting a response from the chat about just airing that thing out, whether that's start to finish or to loosen up the defenses to hammer it late in the game on the ground.
Well, was this the question about Penn State, what they're going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I looked up Penn State right here, and, as much as we want to bag on our friend Jim Knowles, they are 21st in total defense. Now, obviously, the numbers might be skewed because they played Nevada, who's terrible, Florida International, and an FCS school, Villanova, and then got in with some actual living, breathing teams and haven't beaten one of them, which is Oregon, UCLA, Northwestern, and Iowa. Gave up 30 in double overtime to Oregon, 42 to UCLA, 22 to Northwestern, and 25 to Iowa, back-to-back 1-point losses. Just heartbreaking for them, and obviously the coach lost his job. But as I dive into their numbers, Penn State is 89th in rushing defense, giving up almost 160 yards per game. So my guess is that's going to be the area where Ohio State tries to soften things up first, because Penn State's only 6th nationally in passing yards allowed and 28th in passing efficiency defense. So to me, Ohio State's probably going to start with the run game and then go to the pass game, I would think, in this game, especially since Penn State has proven it cannot stop the run or has not been able to.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting. Ryan Day had mentioned 2 weeks ago that they've not yet started drawing up the home run plays, the big play run plays that are designed to go the distance. And so I'm wondering if they're saving them for now, like they've got some time to work on them over the bye week and then unleash them against the 16th ranked Big Ten rush defense of Penn State, which, that's total yardage, that's rushing yardage. They're, I think, middle of the pack in terms of yards per carry, which is probably a better measurement. But, it's not been a great run defense, and they've UCLA, Northwestern, Iowa, to lose those last 3 games tells you basically all you need to know. And originally, I thought the Oregon game cost them the UCLA game, and maybe it did, but each loss is its own thing now. Like there's no carryover from Oregon or whatever. They're just bad.
Yeah, they're on to this backup quarterback now, and Grunkemeyer, I think he completed about 50% of his passes, not much yardage, and there you just slide right over. 15 of 28 for 93 yards and 2 interceptions. I mean, you're not going to beat anybody with that kind of production at the quarterback position. And that was his first start, obviously, because he'd filled in for one play at the end of the Iowa game. That was the Iowa game. Filled in for one play at the end of the Northwestern game was what it was. So, it doesn't bode well. Obviously, they got Katron Allen. I got him going, 28 carries for 145 yards and 2 touchdowns. He will test Ohio State's run defense, no doubt. And, I know we'll get into that matchup a little bit more as we go along. But, to me, I think you look at the ways, I mean, my goodness, Iowa ran for 245 yards and just kind of leaned on Penn State. And, the quarterback had a 67-yard run. That's crazy. So it's going to be interesting.
The 67-yard run, 1 yard fewer than his total passing yards, and you see Grunkemeyer averaging 3.3 yards per pass attempt. That's a bad rush attempt, and you see him throwing the ball 28 times for 93 yards. This and I'm eventually going to watch this so we can do a podcast on it next week. I'm not looking forward to watching Penn State, Iowa. And because of the passing offenses that I know I'm going to see, where it's just the hardest thing in the world to complete a 12-yard pass on 3rd and 6 or whatever. Like every completion that happens, you're like, oh, it's like watching Pee-wee baseball where there's not even a coach pitch, but a Pee-wee leaguer throws a ball, a Pee-wee leaguer hits the ball, and a Pee-wee leaguer fields it, throws it to first. You're like, I can't believe this all worked out, all 4 levels of completion. And that's how I view these passing offenses. And Gronowski used to be able to throw the ball. Like he can't, I don't know what's going on there at Iowa other than it's Iowa and who's he throwing to?
Well, we had an argument of sorts about this on our Iowa show yesterday because it was brought up by our guy, Corey Bratta, that there was what he considered a disingenuous tweet out there by a national writer who said Mark Gronowski against Power 4 competition has 0 touchdown passes and 4 picks. But he forgot to note that he has 7 rushing touchdowns. And I said, well, both can be true because he's like, a touchdown's a touchdown. Does it matter if he rushes for 4 touchdowns or throws for 4 touchdowns? I said, I understand your point in terms of the result of the football game, that you just want to score points and put the ball in the end zone. And his number one job is to move the ball down the field. However, there is an evaluation of passing as a quarterback, and he's not doing that well. So he's throwing for about 60% completion percentage every game, and he's not putting the ball in the end zone through the air. Now, their wide receiver core isn't very good. It's actually better than it's been the last few years, but it's still not very good. And of course, we can only imagine they're not giving him many opportunities, and he is hurt. He has been banged up. So that's Iowa. Now I pulled that up to give I knew Iowa had run the ball down Penn State's throats, but I forgot about the Gronowski factor. So this doesn't necessarily apply to Julian Sayin for sure.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that whenever Ryan Day does not have a running quarterback, the running game suffers. But this kind of defense that they have, I think they can coexist with a bit of a struggling running game because they don't need to 240 yards a game like they did under Justin Fields. They were, last year with Will Howard as a running threat and 2 NFL running backs with them. Like they don't need to be that, I don't believe. They just need to be able to figure out a way to score 24 points in a big game. And then at least at that point, it's a game in the fourth quarter, and then you figure the rest out then.
Yeah. So since we look at this schedule here, there's been some criticism that at least I've heard recently about Ohio State schedules not any good. And why are they number one? Well, first of all, you have to subtract the loss that they ding on everyone. So the composite record of who they've played is 0-7 against them. So it kind of weighs that number down to a certain extent. So there's intent in scheduling, and then there's what actually turns out. So the schedule looked pretty daunting, not like a gauntlet, but from week to week. But obviously Texas, the number one team in the country, Penn State, Michigan, and then tricky trips to Illinois and Washington. So it looked like a pretty difficult schedule. Now, Washington and Illinois, you can play either side of the coin on that they're pretty good teams, they're top 20 level teams, or they're really not that good because they got kicked around a few times. Yeah. Obviously Penn State's nothing close to what were supposed to be. Obviously Texas, let's wait and see on Texas. They may still be a factor. It's only 5-2, and they still have plenty of opportunity to show that they're talented and will live up to that. So it's almost like the Indiana situation. At least this is the way I approach it. Indiana doesn't play anyone in the non-conference. That's their issue. I will hammer them and go crazy about the Indianas and the Rutgers and the Marylands who choose not to play anyone because that's their decision. And Penn State because they choose to play no one. Now, in terms of the conference schedule, they can't do anything about that. It still needs to be evaluated, but they obviously, Indiana should not be apologizing for who they played last year in the Big Ten. They're handed a Big Ten schedule. Same for Ohio State. Just because Penn State turned out to be off the rails was nothing that Ohio State could control, of course.
Well, I mean, the beginning of the season, Texas was 1 and Penn State was 2. So, I mean, when the season began, it looked great. I don't think, again, I write a thing every week, where should Ohio State be ranked? And I think you got to do 60% of it off how good is the team, relatively speaking. And that could be, comparatively through NCAA rankings, defense, offense, and all that, the look test, everything else, game control, all those kind of things. Like, is this a team that's just sliding by on the skin of its teeth? Whoever that was that beat Arkansas last week, A&M, 45-42. I mean, do we really give them credit for gutting out a 45-42 game against a 2-4 Arkansas team? No, hell no. They should get no credit for that. But, it is what it is. It's another win, and they're still undefeated. So, I mean, I compare their undefeated to Ohio State's undefeated, and there's no comparison which one's better. So, I mean, Ohio State hasn't played a 2-4 team down to the wire. So, again, it's all apples to oranges comparisons, but I kind of look at it 60-40. I want to know how good you are. How good are you in 60%? And then the other 40%, I'll go resume, who you've played, records, scores of games, all these other, factors that kind of come into it, just because, again, you could have the best team in the country and not play such a great schedule. And then when you get matched up with the best of the best, one of two things happen. You either shrink in the moment, or you are the best team in the country and you prove it. So I think there is something to be said, though, for being battle tested. I think you've got to play some tough games like Ohio State did last year before getting into the playoff. I mean, the Penn State, Indiana, and Michigan games were all, tough games for Ohio State. They blew Indiana out, but, again, tough game on the whole. So, yeah, Oregon. I just look at, Oregon. It played Oregon earlier. So, I don't know. I think at the end of the year, everyone's strength of schedule is going to be relatively close to one another. I mean, if you're in the Big Ten and the SEC, and right now 4 of Ohio State's 7 opponents are 5-2. I don't know what Ohio University is. I know that Grambling's an FCS school. I know Minnesota is one of them. Wisconsin's obviously 2-5. So, yeah. So I think the other 4 are 5-2. So, to me, that's pretty good quality, And of those 8 losses, Ohio State's 4 of them. So against other teams, they're combined 20-4. So I don't know.
I played this game, Steve, with somebody who called the other day and was railing on Ohio State's schedule. And I said, absolutely, Texas is not as good. Penn State, I get it. But I did the same thing. I said, let's look at the record of these teams, because they were trying to compare Ohio State's schedule against a couple teams in the SEC. And I started in on the record. And they said, well, who have they beaten and who have they beaten? Well, if you really take it down the path, you can chase that tail all over the country. But you can also at some point say, Minnesota's 5-2. It's not the most difficult 5-2, but it's reasonable. It's solid. It's a legitimate 5-2 record against legitimate competition. They do play Nebraska and Ohio State, and they have played some good teams. So yes, the Washington's 5-2. They've lost to the 2 best teams in the country. The Washington lost to Michigan. I was thinking Oregon. But anyway, Washington's beaten some good teams. So, yeah, you can chase that around forever. But Ohio State's schedule is not quite as easy as a lot of people would think it to be.
Well, it's when you're like, well, who have they beaten? It's like you're already siding with, the Big Ten only plays against Big Ten teams. So you're going to dismiss all of those wins. And the SEC plays in the mighty SEC. So you're going to lift up all of those wins. But Texas A&M has a 6-point win at home over a 3-4 Auburn team. It was a 7-point game late in the fourth quarter at home against Florida, who is probably 3-4 at this point, something of that nature. Yeah, 3-4. So this is the number 3 team in the nation. I do wonder if LSU has anything left to them, they should beat Texas A&M this weekend. But I don't know if they do. I don't know if they've quit or if Brian Kelly isn't enough. But Texas A&M they've won some close ones, but not necessarily been great doing it. And now they and Miami are propping up Notre Dame's playoff bid, because how can you knock Notre Dame for those two losses early in the season against 2 top 10 teams? And it's like, well, I mean, they're top 10 for now. We'll see where they finish.
I mean, they went on the road and beat Washington, tough place to play, by 18 points. They're 5-2. Went on the road and beat Illinois, 70,000 people. They're 5-2, beat them by 18 points. So, I don't think they have to apologize to anybody. And they did make the effort to play Texas, who everyone knew was going to be the number 1 team in the country to start the season, and may very well still end up, in the playoff if they can string together some wins here down the line. If they get to 10-3, either win the SEC or, lose the SEC, 10-3, I think they may still get in.
I've been hearing all season that Nebraska is an improved football team. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think they're Rutgers, basically, if you take everything away from their brand and their stadium being filled and all that. That Nebraska, I went on a rant about this after they lost to Minnesota, but still, they're a football team that has a pulse, that has some talent, and Minnesota just beat them by 18 points, and Minnesota's 5-2, and nobody else is beating Minnesota 42-3. Nobody else is doing that to Minnesota.
Yeah. In Nebraska, to me, they can't lose in that manner if they really want to be accepted as legitimate, which Matt Rule is fighting to do that. And it's curious that they lay such a big egg, just days after all the speculation that he could leave to go to his alma mater at Penn State, that you just wonder if the players psychologically are like looking at each other and like, okay, what's there to do in State College, But it to me, that was an outlier to me, that you can't go in there and lay an egg like that. And you know, this Big Ten, it can help Ohio State or it can hinder Ohio State. And right now, the jury's out on that.
Well, once all these, this is all I know, is when I evaluate these leagues, once they start playing each other, they all go 500. So we can sit there and we can evaluate the level of play, and there's nothing wrong with that, or the distribution of the power within the conference. There are top-heavy leagues. There are free-for-alls like the Big 12. There's all sorts of composition within the league. But I know that once they start playing each other, they all go 500, regardless of how good they are. So the best way to evaluate them is a very inexact way, because they don't play enough non-conference games to do it. But you got to look at the non-conference games.
Mm-hmm.
They don't play enough, and they don't play like seeded non-conference games. You know, you got all these Alabama, Wisconsin kind of matchups, and what do you do with that? You really can't do much with it. So there are very few cross-conference matchups and results throughout the country that mean a whole lot. Texas A&M, Notre Dame would be one, Miami, Notre Dame, those kind of games, Texas, Ohio State, but then that gets discredited by some.
What I've found over the years is to do it the way ESPN and other national pundits do it, is that if the SEC is beating the Big Ten in bowl games, that's all the proof you need. If they're not, it's because they didn't want to be there. I don't know how else to get more scientific than that.
That's very scientific. That's an approach. That's as approaches go, that's one of them. So yeah. It is very telling just to watch, you know, some of the college football live and some of the other things that they produce on a weekly basis, just some of the dumb bullshit that comes out on those shows. And you know, you have the Emmanuel Acho or whoever, that guy, you know, his uninformed takes usually are pretty good too. So yeah, they got any number of people on those shows that either have a bias or don't care enough to actually research things to find out what the actual story is. If you watch Ohio State play, there's no way you can watch them play and not say that's a great college football team.
Yeah, for sure. Did you guys see the ESPN's, I think their YouTube highlight show? I guess they have one on Saturday nights or whatever, showing clips of Ohio State, and one of the anchors says, I wish we could show more clips of Julian saying, but all of the backroom dealings keep us from being able to do that. Basically, like, we can't show as much Big Ten or as much Ohio State as we would like because of, you know, some would say, well, maybe CBS didn't give you enough clips, but then why mention, you know, the whole backroom dealings? It's like, well, that's just,
I'm not aware of anything like that.
You would just say CBS doesn't allow us to do that.
Yeah, I'm not aware of anything like that. I would think that the Big Ten would permit, you know, the free trading of. I mean, Mark, you worked in this ecosphere, and I mean, what I know for the Olympics, they tell you you're limited to 2 minutes of something an hour, and that's why ESPN was showing still shots of people quite a bit when they would win things, and just
of course the NFL.
And the NFL is that way too.
Yes,
if you're not a rights holder,
it's tight on the NFL. ESPN would produce documentaries that you would think, when you heard the hype behind them, and they were done extremely well, but still, you know, some kind of Super Bowl 50th anniversary Super Bowl, and you'd think, oh man, this is amazing, I got to watch this thing. And then, you know, there's they you know, it was always the split second the ball came out of the quarterback's hands to the receiver, you know, they would clip these highlights like that because they were tight. They could only get like 4 minutes in on a 2-hour special, and there'd be still shots all over the place, and they try to do everything possible to get around that. But that was a big stipulation. But college football, now that it's been removed out of ESPN's hands, meaning the Big Ten, there might be some stipulations there I'm not aware of, but obviously ESPN and ABC still had a Big Ten contract when I was around. So
yeah, well, to me that's self-imposed. If they're producers or they're you know, ESPN head of network or whoever has dictated, we are not going to, you know, we're going to do the bare bones minimum on the Big Ten because they shunned us, then that's their problem. That's not anybody else's problem. And in the end, it doesn't do them any good because they own the overall product at the end of the season, and they need people to understand why Ohio State is so good to tune in to watch the playoffs. I mean,
Right.
it's a dumbass approach. If they're constricting it on their own, that's their fault. And I can't imagine the Big Ten would not want publicity on other outlets because none of their outlets, I mean, Fox does some stuff, but CBS has their CBS Sports Network stuff. NBC really doesn't do anything other than the game. So I don't know.
I wouldn't see Disney saying, Fox, you can't show highlights. You can only show 2 highlights of a game from any of our SEC teams. I wouldn't see them limiting that. It was just interesting to see, what the quiet part spoken out loud, basically.
Well, I think David Greenshield's getting to the crux of it right there.
Right.
I think that's
I
when the
agree.
whole place just imploded.
It all went to hell.
That was actually 5 years ago this month. So yes, it was in October when I was given my mandate to shut down. So last couple things on Ohio State's legitimacy. I saw RG3, formerly of ESPN, now with Fox, and I think RG3 does a nice job on the game broadcasts. But I'm watching, or somebody sends me his tweet that he is ranking Indiana #1 over Ohio State simply because Indiana beat Illinois by 53 and Ohio State only beat Illinois by 18.
Yeah.
Really. I have no issue with him ranking Indiana #1, but on the strength of a 1-game comparison of point totals. Really.
Doesn't make any sense.
No, they've played 7 games, not 1 game. They've played 7.
Well, and then how often have we seen, Ohio State beat a lot of teams that Michigan didn't beat last year. So why did those 2 teams need to play? Like Ohio State's clearly better than Michigan. Yeah. So, it's those are always funny things where it's just like, even Ryan Day said, you can't look at that game because it was such an outlier in terms of like Ohio State can't expect to get that same kind of Illinois team that happened. The perfect storm of circumstances and bad plays. Like it was what it was. It was a one-time thing. And now it's Indiana would not do it again, probably in 10 opportunities.
No, you still give Indiana credit, but yeah, you understand that we watch Washington, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, USC, Michigan, these teams that are like, who's going to be the 4th team to reach the playoffs out of the Big Ten, out of the, and you watch them play, and outside of that Illinois, Indiana score, and Indiana's, they've risen above. I get that. They went out to Autzen Stadium, so give them all the credit. But generally, this is what I find fascinating about the Big Ten, because we used to have to watch 3 games in the Eastern Division, and Penn State lost them anyway, but we still had to include them. Watch 3 games in the Big Ten East and really ignore the Big Ten West, and then whoever the sacrificial lamb was, that was the whole deal for 5 years in the Big Ten. And now we get these intriguing Michigan, USC, Illinois. We got Illinois going out to Washington this weekend. I don't know who's going to win that game. Like, I think that these, for as much as I love the tradition and I didn't want the Pac-12 to go away, these mid-level, where it's actually upper-level Big Ten games are fascinating.
Yep, it's been pretty good on the whole. Again, I don't have the schedule for this weekend in front of me. I think, is this a Michigan State weekend?
Yes.
Michigan's got to take care of business there. I don't know. I don't know if there's any other good games this weekend. Indiana, UCLA, kind of a test of, how much emotion can you live off of, I guess. I don't know, but I think they're going to find out a really sad reality at Indiana, I would think.
Yeah, I don't think a 4th team is going to emerge from
it doesn't feel like
the Big Ten, and USC would maybe need to make it to the Big Ten championship game. I don't see them beating Oregon. Oregon is going to knock a lot of these 1-loss, 2-loss teams out because of their remaining schedule. And I just don't see anybody good enough and consistent enough to remain as a 2-loss team.
Yeah.
It's certainly not Northwestern. USC is going to have to lose to Oregon. Iowa, I'm not even going to bother looking at their schedule. Michigan, like Ohio State and Michigan could be for a Michigan playoff berth. And I think that's going to be a huge game and a huge opportunity for Ohio State to knock Michigan back to like Orlando or wherever those teams go now. Like Minnesota, like good job against Nebraska. Can we have faith in you? No, because again, you've got to go to Oregon and Iowa. And so like I just don't see an avenue for another Big Ten team. And it's like, well, what about Washington? Well, they also have to play Oregon, and they go to UCLA. They've got Illinois this week. Like Oregon would have to get upset somewhere along the line, and the team that upsets them will have to win all of their other games, basically. And I just don't see that happening.
Yes, we've got 3 5-2 versus 5-2 elimination games: Northwestern, Nebraska, Minnesota, Iowa, and Illinois, Washington. So at least those 3 are going to produce elimination games.
And if Michigan loses, they're eliminated.
Yeah. Interesting. Although, the winners will be 6-2, but I agree with you, Tony. It's difficult to see any of those navigating, except Illinois. Now, the thing with Illinois is if they win this game in Seattle, the rest of their schedule, they're very much had a front-loaded schedule. They're going to be the favorite the rest of the way, but their best win is going to be USC on the last play of the game. They're going to have to hope that USC finishes 9-3, 10-2. Well, if they finish 10-2, then they're going to that would be an interesting decision. Illinois and USC both finished 10-2.
Well, and USC would have a win over Oregon at that point, and only one Big Ten loss.
But Illinois would have the head-to-head on the last play of the game.
So then at that point, you've got to give it to Illinois. But then I think you're going to see there's going to be a big push for 9-3 SEC teams over 10-2 Big Ten teams.
Yes.
Because they're going to have more ranked wins because of how the SEC gets ranked. And, LSU is still out there floating around as the number 20 team. And it's hard for people to just drop SEC teams out of the rankings. And it's much easier for them to drop or never add a Big Ten team into the rankings. Like, Washington never got ranked. And you just look at this and it's like, well, I mean, what's the point? What's the point in ranking these Big Ten teams when they're just going to get knocked out anyway? And I don't think anybody ever feels that way about the SEC.
We were looking at 5-1 teams last week on one of the call-in shows, and I challenged somebody because they were sticking up for the SEC. And I try to play it on both sides because, let's be fair, the SEC has posted the best results against the other conferences in the non-conference games. They're 11-4, and if you look at the wins, they are the best wins. They don't look that impressive, but when you line them up against the other conferences, they are. But I told them, I said, you find me a 5-1 SEC team, I guarantee that there has not been a 5-1 SEC team in the last 10 years plus that has not been ranked.
Right.
There's no way.
It would be a rarity.
I think it's not happened. I can about guarantee that. I would put a fairly large wager on that. In the last 10 years, no 5-1 SEC team has been unranked. No. The last thing I'll say about Ohio State's legitimacy in terms of a ranking is, and I don't think this should come into play for the ranking, because I think the ranking should be based on the performance, the results of that current season. Absolutely. So if Wake Forest starts next season 7-0 and they've played some decent, rank them where they should be ranked. But in terms of what the projection is, or the expectation, or the perceived legitimacy of it, there is a difference between if Nebraska was 7-0 right now, and we were like, okay, they really haven't played anybody. Cincinnati's okay, and Minnesota's okay, and they're 7-0, but they haven't been any good forever. So how good is this team? Versus this is kind of a known commodity. This is the known commodity in the sport right now. So like these players that are on the field have actually won a national championship. They've actually defeated all these really good teams. This program has, been an 11-1 program forever. So that's different than suddenly Indiana comes out of nowhere and they're 11-1. We don't know how good they are. I think we know how good this team is.
Yep.
All right.
They're showing it. They're showing it on a weekly basis. So yeah, let's let it we're halfway through. Let's continue to let the season play out.
And we'll pick this up from our buddy Yakov. Appreciate you being here. 85 Bears, 86 Giants, 2000 Ravens, 2025 Buckeyes, ?
Well, I mean, how do you argue with that? I mean, those are all very good defenses. I would say the one thing to keep in mind, those first three defenses really not playing modern offense. Ohio State's, they didn't face modern offenses. Ohio State's defense has to face modern offenses. So I guess in that way, you could say it's the greatest defense in the history of football, just because they've got all of offensive football from today to 1,000 years ago to have to defend. Whereas those first three teams, they just had to defend the run and some play action passes. And that was about it. And so now, like RPOs, trust me, you're not running out a 3-4 New York Giants defense against the RPO. Like Lawrence Taylor is going to be turned into a nickel because of his athleticism and his need to stay outside and try to defend. He'd be completely negated. Mike Singletary as a middle linebacker would be like, there's just nowhere here for you to play. Sorry. Maybe be a good coach. And then 2000 Ravens, I mean, come on, they're a joke. I think we all know that.
I love having these discussions with my son, but it's usually concerning baseball statistics. He's always throwing like historical charts that he comes across every day, and he throws them at me. Then I have to put them into context. Well, you got to understand that Bob Gibson had a 1.12 ERA in 1968, and Carl Yastrzemski won the batting title at 3.01. It was a pitcher dominant. Like the league ERA was like 2.98 that year, and I throw that into context. Listen to this, Steve, if you didn't catch this one. My son threw this at me the other day. Is this the greatest stat line in the history of baseball, especially postseason baseball? Shohei Ohtani went 3 for 3 with 3 home runs, and he went 6 innings, no runs, and 1 hit.
And struck out 10.
Yes.
Unbelievable. Yeah, maybe the greatest single game performance by anybody in the history of sports. I mean, you think about Jesse Owens setting like 3 world records in a span of 45 minutes.
Where'd he
at
go
the
to
Big
school?
Ten meet at the University of Michigan. That was pretty good. Yeah, I don't know who else or where else would be up there. What's that? Yeah, Wilt had 100 points in a game.
Yeah.
Don Larson threw a perfect game in the World Series. I don't know. There's a few here and there, but yeah, what he did, I mean, he is, obviously going to have to stand the test of time, but he is bucking right now to be the greatest baseball player who ever lived.
He is.
Just because of what he can do on both sides.
In terms of that stat line, my only question is why only 6 innings? I'm tired of the pitchers today that can only go 6 innings.
Tommy John, he had coming off Tommy John last year. They're still babying him a little bit, but yeah, our friend Noon, he has to sit through this whole World Series with the Dodgers and the upstart Blue Jays. I mean, how about that? So yeah, it's going to be feel bad for Seattle. That was rough way to go out, and at least the Seahawks won, I guess, the other night. I don't know, but yeah.
All right, folks, we do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Typically 11 a.m. Eastern time. We went a little bit early, so all you have to do is rewind and go back to the start to catch what you missed from these two. Tony, what's going on at Buckeye Huddle and the Buckeye Weekly podcast this week?
Yeah, we did Kevin and I did an episode of Buckeye Weekly on Tuesday, recapping what we learned from Ryan Day. Going to record an episode today where we rewatch or watch for the first time the Alabama-Tennessee game, because we've got some time this week doing some rewatching of some SEC games and how Ohio State would compare to either or both of these teams. So you can probably expect that maybe later today, at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle or any of your podcast platforms of choice.
Speaking of Tennessee, to a certain extent, Nico Iamaleava threw one of the worst interceptions I've seen this season in that Maryland highlight. He's standing in his own end zone, and he throws the ball out in the flat, just assuming his running back's there, and somebody broke on the ball and just picked it off, and they were almost standing in the end zone when they picked it up, like the 2-yard line, touchdown, pick six. It was horrendous. It was only to be eclipsed by the Wisconsin quarterback, the third stringer, who threw the ball to the Iowa defensive end like 6 yards behind the line of scrimmage. That one was a good one too. Steve, what's going on this week?
I'm just getting some R&R, and then I'll be back in the saddle on Friday, Saturday, gearing up for next week's game against Penn State, and also the start of the basketball season. So kind of, juggling a lot of stuff right now, but just recharging and I'm gonna go take a nap. Just getting ready to get ready, I guess.
That's what Steve's got going on this week. All right. Guys, appreciate you being here and keeping me on the rails. So they had to pull me in for this one. So, Steve, you enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll be back next week, everyone.
All right, guys, take care.